Hello, everyone. I am so glad you've decided to be a part of our July GB7 session. I think it's absolutely great that you're here. We are talking today about why they need to read children, books, and representation. Now, before we start that, it's important for you to know, I think, that GB7 is a new program by Brooks Permissions. We started in June with two events on GB 105, the 105th birthday anniversary celebration of Gwendolyn Brooks. And those two events were critically acclaimed. We did a pack of poets with a tremendous roster of nationally known and celebrated poets. And then we did Friends and Family in the evening, where we had members of Gwendolyn Brooks's family, as well as friends like Hakeem Matabuti and Val Gray Ward, talking about memories that they shared, thoughts, and so forth. So today, I'm going to let other wonderful people talk to you about exactly what you'll hear from us today. But since we're talking about books, thought it was only fair that we share first with you some of Gwendolyn Brooks's children's books. She first started with Bronxville Boys and Girls, and that was in 1956. And then the image that you see now is when they brought it back out with the beautiful illustrations by Faith Ringgold in the 1980s. So that is 34 different poems about 34 different children you might find in your neighborhood, including a poem named Nora, which, strangely enough, just happens to be my name. Another book called We Are Shining is based on a piece called A Little Girl's Poem, and it was renamed We Are Shining as a picture book, which was lovingly illustrated by the award winning writer artist Jan Spivey Gilchrist. And it tells about what children have a right to expect from the world. And I think in the times that we're going through now, that's critically important for us to be discussing. There were other books too, including
I'll go ahead, Very Young Poets, which is a chapbook filled with great suggestions for poetry writing for children. There is a line from her poem, Books Feed and Cure, and Chortle and Collide. That stands out to me. It is books and meat and medicine and flame and flight and flight. That is fire. It's just showing just how important it is to read and how important books are and how to write your poetry. Darius,
I'm on, and also we're very excited to continue Mama's legacy by introducing new works to the lineup from pieces that, of course, are classic works of hers, such as our new illustrated poetry series called Graphic Gwendolyn, through which we've released two issues. The first is a issue entitled "A Song on the Front Yard." This was our introductory issue of Graphic Gwendolyn. It introduces us to the world of a young girl's imagination. And the next volume, which we just released this year, entitled Two Boys, explores the lives of two young men whose wildly different paths, which could and often do merge, illustrate the struggle of their shared lived experiences. All of these books you can find online. And we have one more that we definitely have to talk about. Nora, you ready?
yes, The Tiger Who Wore White Gloves. This is a full circle book for me. when I was about 8, 9, or 10, I had a Halloween costume on. Uh, it was a tiger. I was going out as a tiger for Halloween. But for some reason, it just wasn't working for me. And so I went ahead and went back in my room and I found white gloves. And so when my mother finished, got off the floor after laughing hysterically, she said, "I'm going to write a poem about that." And so she did. Years later, she wrote this. She wrote this book, and the poem begins: "There once was a tiger, terrible and tough, who said, 'I don't think tigers are stylish enough.'" And it goes on from there with the tiger having an identity crisis. And you can get, we haven't talked about where you could pick these books up from, but that's later. But this one is from Third World Press. So and so I believe that rounds up our collection of books, which takes us to, I'd like to formally introduce Cynthia Walls. You heard her voice sharing information earlier. Um, but she is our illustrious vice president of Brooks Permissions. And in her own right, is a talented and celebrated director. So she can tell you more about that later on. So she has she has a job to do. So I will connect you with Cynthia Walls, who can take us from there.
On behalf of Brooks Permissions, I am honored to introduce our moderator, Jurema Gorham. Jurema is the mother of Trey Gorham, a prudent and dynamic young man at the age of 10. Jurema is an educational doctorate candidate at Concordia University here in Chicago and the founder and executive director of Burst into Books. And now, Jurema Gorham.
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited for tonight's conversation. Not only am I excited just because it's one of my favorite topics, but I get to talk about it with some of my favorite people. Tonight, we're going to talk about the importance of literature, and not just literature in itself, but Black literature for children. And I brought along some amazing people who are in the field, who are fellow companions with me in advocating and making sure that all children have access to this literature. So at this time, I would love for us to start bringing in some of our panelists, and we're going to start off our conversation. Hello, hello, everybody. Everyone's starting to come on in. Okay, okay. So I'm so excited. So tonight's topic is entitled Why They Need to Read Children, Books, and Representation. And so all of you are individuals that I admire in your work in just making sure that children have access to the books that they need to read, and also in particular, Black literature. And so before we get into the conversation, I want to first give you all an opportunity to introduce yourselves so you all can know who we have in the space. So I'm actually going to start off with Evan.
Hey, Jurema, thank you for that. Hello, everyone. My name is Evan Roberts. I am a children's picture book author. I'm also an educator. I teach science at the high school level right here in the south suburban area of Chicago. Super excited to be here today to have this conversation and share some insights that will hopefully help our listeners to have a better appreciation of why literature is so important for our young people.
All right. And then the next person, let's go to Jeff.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jurema, for having me. And this is an illustrious panel. I'm humbled to be a part of it. My name is Jeff Deutsch. I'm the director of 57th Street Books and the Seminary Co-op on the south side of Chicago. We are a community bookstore. We're actually the first not-for-profit bookstore in the country whose mission is bookselling. And 57th Street Books will be turning 40 years old next year. And we are also a store that Gwendolyn Brooks shopped at, and many other incredible authors and educators and community leaders have shopped in as well. So we're very proud to be a part of this conversation.
Next, we have Latanya.
Hello, everyone. My name is Latanya Devaughn, and I'm the founder of Bronx Bound Books. We are a bookstore on wheels based out of the Bronx, New York City, and I'm really happy to be here.
Cool. And as we continue to go, we have an amazing panelist that will join us, but we're going to go ahead and get started with our first question. So my first question, and let me set the tone. This is a conversation. So if any of y'all know me, I'm not stuffy. We're not, going one by one. This is really us just talking. And so my first question to you all is, why does it matter that children have access to books? We're just going to start with the general question. Whoever would love to tackle that first, you can go ahead and jump in. Jeffy,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Evan. Go ahead.
Well, I just start out by saying that children, if we want to help them encourage their creativity and their imagination, books are a great place to start. And all of the early literacy skills that parents want their children to learn, sight word recognition, being able to, figure out main idea versus supporting detail, and just having an appreciation of reading. I think all of those things start at a very young age. So books serve a huge role in helping our young people to develop that early love of reading and wanting to, just dive into a book and get lost in the pages of a great story.
I love it. And before we go further, because she is here, I just want to, Iesha is okay. I already told her this is a conversation. So as you all can see, Iesha is in the trenches as we speak. She is at a pop-up selling books. So appropriate for what we're doing right now. So before we get to that question, Iesha, I had everyone just share who they were and just give a little bit about themselves, and then we'll continue going. So you got the floor.
I do want to apologize to everybody. I wanted to support Jurema because she definitely always has supported me, but I double book everything. I'm trying to do everything at one time, and sometimes I'm not cautious of the timing of everything. But currently, we are at the farmers market in South Loop, where we're promoting literacy. We're opening up a bookstore in Roseland, but in order for it to open up, we need all hands on deck. So we pop up in different communities to talk about what we're doing in Roseland. I am a special ed reading teacher. I've been in education for about 13 years, but opening a bookstore led me to teach in my community. And right now, everything is Roseland for me, but we have to start with literacy. So that's me.
Awesome. And you hit it right on what the question is. And so if anybody else wants to tackle before we go to our next one, why is it just important that children have access to books and reading skills overall?
Inspire innovation. I think reading you can do anything once you learn how to read, right? So it starts with us. People love to see themselves in books. It's about relating. Sometimes people feel like they're alone and they pick up a book and someone's going through something similar, or the person looks like them, the hair looks like them, or their eyes, or whatever feature, it makes people want to feel connected, really.
Yeah, I love it. I know Evan hit on just like the basic phonics and literacy and just being able to comprehend. Iesha just talking about even the importance of access in a particular neighborhood, which is Roseland, which we both are serving in. And then to your point about innovation. And so this leads me to our next question. So we've talked about why is it important that children have access to books, but in particular for this conversation, why is it important that they have access to Black literature, books that represent them and books that they see themselves, whether or not they identify as African American? Why is it important that all children have access to books that represent people of color?
So they can understand those around them. The world isn't just made up of people that look like them, think like them, eat like them, whatever like them. So you can be able to understand why someone wears something like that or pronounces a word a certain way, or, we meet a lot of people throughout our lifetime, and to be able to relate and connect and to make someone feel like they've been seen as well. Because sometimes we go through this life and no one sees us. But if you can see someone else that looks like your neighbor or yourself in a book, you know, you need that really to create community as well, to create dialogue, to create conversation. You know, I think books that are Black are important. We have some amazing stories to tell, our writers and illustrators.
I agree. And even to the point of, you know, as everyone was able to share their background, like who they are and what they do. Jeff, you just spoke about 57th Street going into 40 years, right? So we have 40 years, 57th Street Bookstore, who's been providing literature to the community. Many of us, as if you didn't catch on earlier, Latanya is from the Bronx. And so she'll get a point to kind of talk about her mobile bookstore and why that was important. Authors here, we have educators here. In your 40 years, and you know, I know you've done a variety of things in the book selling world. Why is Black literature so important in bookstores and just even access in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And if I can, I think I want to answer both questions simultaneously, because part of it, I'm part of why I'm so excited to be on this panel is to see how many people just on this panel are thinking about what does it mean to bring books into the forefront and have the idea of the presence of books. And so part of what's been so special about being in a bookstore, and especially in a bookstore that's serving a predominantly Black community, and you know, the South Side has one of the richest histories of creating books as well, of literature throughout the world. Some of the best literature ever written has come out of the books written in our neighborhoods. And how do we create authors as well? And it's the presence of books. So even when they're not reading books, kids, if they're around them, coming into bookstores and libraries is incredible. But I'm just so impressed with Latanya and Iesha to be out, and Jurema, you're doing this, to be out, bringing books also, and making sure that there's a presence of books, whether you're not in the space of books or you are, and having these stores on wheels and these spaces on wheels. And so then to have the language and books and the constant engagement with these, the poetry that Gwendolyn Brooks was writing, which doesn't have to just exist in a bookstore. We can just talk about it and say it to each other. And you know, Evan, having been in spaces with you that are, out on book fairs on the street, and what happens when the kids get so excited about the books and how magical it is, and then to Latanya's point, to see themselves in it and to say, not only are these books for me, and do I understand myself better through them, but also, I love words, I love language, and I too can create these incredible experiences. That feels really important.
I love it. And when I think about that, to that point, when you were saying that they can see themselves as writer, like I can even think about growing up. And so my next question is like, how have we seen the development of Black literature for children change over time? And so I know even now, doing the work that I do, there is so many books coming out that are representing the communities, and we'll talk more about, is there still work to be done? But I've just seen a major shift in the types of books and the topics and the protagonists of books, and even like what those characters are doing. And so why does that matter? Like, could you talk about maybe your own experience growing up as a child and just how you've seen the change of the literature from when you were younger to now? And this could be open to anybody.
Well, I'll go back to your previous question first, Jurema, and that we all say representation matters, but why? And I think that's an important component to understanding this. And books can transform a person, because especially for children, they can actually experience someone else's pain, someone else's struggle. They can experience someone else's frustration with what's happened in their life, but also how they coped with it, how they got through it, how they were able to survive and overcome and become better through that experience. So I think we say representation matters, and it's important, but it's important because through books, our young people can not only see themselves, but they can see a way to having a better life for themselves. They can see a way through, hey, that person is interested in things like me, or was interested in things just like I am. And here's what, he or she did to make things work. So I think that's something that as an author, I always keep in the back of my mind, like this is a book that could transform a kid's life. And I want to make sure that message is there, and that they really can just grab a hold of that, because I think that's really what representation is all about.
Yeah. Anybody else want to speak to just how you've seen like the shift in the type of literature, and how that's maybe impacted
I want to speak on it, but I don't know if you can hear the musicians in the background. But
No, we hear you. You're fine. Yep.
so when you think about having access to books with people that kind of looks like you and represent what you stand for, it's a confidence thing. For me, in my community, we need a little bit more confidence within ourselves to try to battle the things that we're battling. If we don't know like the lineage of like where we started and how did we get here, we can't really like hone in on how strong we are, how diligent, resilient we are, because it's on TV and sometimes it could be a distraction. But when you have a book and it has facts in it that you can kind of go back, oh, this really did happen. It says so. It kind of gives, oh, I could do this too. And so right now, I think when you see it in the modern form of seeing like all these things that Black people are doing, it's inspiring. It's giving us the confidence to keep fighting for what we need to be fighting for in within our culture. So I really want to hone in, like, because I know when my son is reading, he feels powerful. Like I can tell when my son is thinking highly of himself because he can articulate, he can comprehend. But when he talks to his peers, he has a confidence in that because he knows he's smart. And we have associated with if you can read and comprehend like that, that's intelligence. And so you should be confident in it. And that's what we're trying to bring in Roseland. Because if they're more confident, I want to say that maybe we can have better conversations with each other. Then I want to say that maybe we can decrease the violence. So it's more important because if you read now, it's a trickling effect to dismantling a whole bunch of things. But you got to kind of start with like educating yourself.
Yes. Yes. I totally agree. And I see the nods. We agree. I actually want to you hit on something and we have our next question, but I want to go to Latanya because um when we first met through a mutual friend, she was like, y'all have to know each other. Like, y'all got to meet. Like, you all have similar energy. And me and her, I felt like it was as if we were like long lost cousins when we got on the phone. But her heart for what you just talked about, like having kids have that shine that happens in their eyes and having that access to books and it's transformational, right? We're trying to transform spaces. I would love for you to speak to because all of us are actually in Illinois. So to hear about this conversation in New York, I would love for you to kind of speak to how have you seen the importance of Black literature being able, as you're, and even why you chose a mobile bookstore, why is that important that they have access to Black literature in where you serve?
So, thank you for that. I started the bookstore because we are a book desert. We only have one brick and mortar bookstore in the Bronx. There's not even a Barnes and Noble. So a lot of the kids don't know that. So when I go to these schools and I ask them, well, how many bookstores do you think we have in the Bronx? And they don't realize that they go to Manhattan or another part of New York and not the Bronx. Manhattan has over 70 bookstores and the Bronx has one brick and mortar bookstore. The Yankees, J-Lo, all of that, right? And we only have one bookstore. And it's alarming, to people when they realize that. So I'm in schools. I curate classroom libraries. I do book fairs. One woman in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood told me that half these books would be banned in Florida. And I said, thank you. Thank you very much. Because I'm bringing these Black books, these Black authors, Black topics, Black and Latino, brown, to these neighborhoods in the Bronx, right? And there's kids who are eager to see themselves, or they saw a book at Barnes and Noble or somewhere else where they now have access to it because I'm able to have a certain amount of books for free. The bus is rented sometimes, and when you rent the bus, the books are free. And honestly, that's way more rewarding than it is to sell a book when I can just give the books away. But I'm a business and I sell books. I did a book fair where the books were free and the school pre-purchased the books, but I was able to curate the books for the kids to take home for Christmas. All the books were just beautiful. Black and brown faces, the authors, everything was there. Representation as far as gender, ethnicity, like just everything was there. I pride myself in the curation of the books that I do pick for the schools. Even the teachers were trying to like take the books for themselves, and I'm like, wait a minute, these are for the kids. And I was able to go back to the school and speak to the kids about the books after they read them, and having that real-time feedback from a class of 30, then going to another class and meet 25 more kids talking about how they felt about these books, and how some of the kids didn't want to read, you know, but they saw a book at the book fair and it was free, so they decided to read. So now they're in love with Jason Reynolds. You know, these stories, it's real life, and it almost feels like an after school special. But our job is so special and so important to these kids. I do have adult titles as well, and that's another story for another day. But the representation is really that glue that can make someone a reader for life, and that's what I feel. I think I answered all your whole question.
You did. My question is, as we all gather here because of Brooks' permission, is all of us, as we talk about like the importance of literature, one of my ultimate favorite writers is Gwendolyn Brooks. And when I think about, just as you talked about, like what's transformational, I would love for us to just talk about the works of Gwendolyn Brooks as we're talking about authors that children should see themselves and should read. How do you feel like her work fits into this conversation?
Empathy.
Speak to that. What do you mean empathy?
Thinking about what's that person thinking about over there, or what could that person be feeling. Her work is so brilliant for so many different reasons, but it's the curiosity of others around you that really draws me in, because I'm a writer also, so I'm not published yet, but she's really one of the people that I look up to as far as like when I decide to go that publishing route.
I want to chime in on her. When I think of Gwendolyn Brooks, I always think of the poem "We Real Cool." And I know I did that with some students, but I like, when I think a word that I can use for her is relatable. The poem was really short, and I think it's because I'm in education, because I use it a lot, you know. So she was relatable, and she made me follow her work from that one poem, because I think I saw myself in that, and I had to make sure I wasn't that cool. And so that's what she did for me, and I'm a big fan of her as well, Jurema.
Yes. Anybody else want to chime in? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say,
but this, I love how people want to jump in because this is the most enjoyable question to share. Go ahead, Devaughn.
No, I was just gonna say that I look at it from the standpoint too of, you know, part of Gwendolyn's story is breaking away from the establishment and seeking to support smaller Black-owned publishers. You know, I think that in and of itself speaks to the consciousness that she had and the awareness that she had in terms of community, and just making sure that, you know, her voice and the message that she wanted to represent was, you know, in a place where it would most benefit people who could you know, appreciate her perspective and all of the stories, you know, about Chicago and all the areas that, you know, that she had visited. I think all of that has a lot to do with just looking at somebody's individual determination and seeing how they connected back to still wanting to be have a presence with community and giving back and making sure that they have a presence in community, even though they are ascending and becoming more and more successful. And I think that's the part that really resonates with me personally.
I was going to share something very similar, and I appreciate that. I appreciate thinking about the writing itself, but then the community piece, and asking the question about what is the work, and actually what is Gwendolyn Brooks' legacy from a work perspective. And a lot of it's on the page, but the fact that we're all here talking about her and recognizing even that the work isn't, of being an author isn't just putting words on a page. It's actually building literary community and having mentorship and helping bring other people into the enthusiasm and the accessibility and the idea that they're relatable. That Iesha mentioned. And I had the privilege of speaking with her publisher actually a couple of days ago, Dr. Hakeem Adabuti, who's been mentioned a couple of times. And we were talking about a number of things, but for the notion of not that she went to him, worked with him as a publisher to ensure that there was a Black-owned press that was in the community that was thinking about the books and who was reading them. But he shared with me a very beautiful anecdote about when he first met her, and he had just had a book put together, and she, of course, was already teaching and had won the Pulitzer by that point. And he said, "Hi, Ms. Brooks, I want to share with you my book." And it had the cover had a picture of Africa on the cover, and she just looked at him, he told me, and held the book to her heart and looked him in the eye and said, "I'm going to read it tonight," which she then did, and then started a lifelong friendship and mentorship. And and the lesson that he shared from that was, you find mentors who only want to see you succeed, and you find what's in your heart. And that was the lesson that I wanted to carry, he said. And I think so many people in our communities have been so touched by that kind of approach, and to think about what it means to be a literary citizen is the same as what it means to be a citizen in our communities. And I think Gwendolyn Brooks has given us all a paragon to aspire to.
I agree. When I think about her work, one of her famous lines that I love personally is that we are each other's business, right? Like this idea that at the end of the day, that curiosity, like it should matter to me what's happening in your world just as much as it should matter what happens in my world, and I think through reading, we're able to, as you spoke to, children are able to not only feel like they can relate to it, but they're able to see the world through someone else's eyes, right? And what does that do for a child? The younger they are, that they get access to those kind of books. And so my next question is, we spoke to just some of the books, and even as you say, Iesha is book selling, and we all work in that space. But I feel like we still got a lot of work to do. Like there's a lot of great books, that are representative of communities and kids and stories, historical fiction. But I still feel like there's some gaps and things that we need to try to tackle. So I would love to, and again, like with all of our different expertise, I know even with Evan being an author, he is also a publisher. So as Latanya talked about, she want to get a book out. We got a connection here. Y'all need to talk. He might be the one that can hook you up. But what do you all think is some of the gaps that you would love to still see happen in the literature that our kids are reading?
So for me personally, a lot of the times, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. A lot of the times, people say access to books and providing books, and it's so passive. Really, they think that the book is just the thing and that's it. But I really feel like people need to come back or stay and engage with the community that you just provided the books to. Is like, what's next? What's the bigger picture? Giving the book is a start, right? But there has to be more. So I feel like, can this person read? Does this person have more books at home? What happened after the person read the book? Things like that. I think people just stop at the book giving and not move forward after to see what the follow-up is.
Yeah, I agree. Anybody else want to chime in?
Yeah, go ahead, Iesha.
You sure, Jeff? No, I think we're missing a conversation, right? I think we get the book, we recommend the book, the person to get the book, they'll go read it. But I think we're missing that high level dialect, but not just amongst a person that looks like you or the person that's around your same age or was in the same community. We're missing that diverse conversation in a whole sense. I would love to see that. Like that's why I'm really passionate about what I'm trying to do to Rosen, because it's sitting next to another community called Pullman that is much more diverse than Rosen. But I do believe like if there was a space where people can converse about these books that everybody's putting out, because it's not about the books, it's about what's in the books that can bring on the conversation. I'm not seeing it enough. I'm not seeing like men talking to older women or even just to the LGBTQ and like talking to someone not like them so that we can come to some type of understanding or and I don't even know if we need an understanding, but we need an appreciation for each other. But that's only gonna come from like that conversation, right? So I think the gap is like more spaces, more bookstore cafes in like places that don't have it.
Yeah, Jurema. I was gonna add. Hello, can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I was just gonna add that I think the gap is twofold. I think one area where I see that we could really improve is, a lot of times our young people, and this is me putting on my educator hat, my teacher hat, uh, our young people struggle not so much because they don't understand the content, but more so because of just social interactions and understanding how to, problem solve, understanding how to, see things from another person's point of view, empathy, and just, coming every day with that positive mindset, being a willing learner, not a reluctant learner. I think those are things that you can help kids to develop through books, right? And so we oftentimes, I think of books as just like another way for children to be entertained. And we don't realize just how impactful books can be in terms of social skills, social emotional development, and helping students and helping our young people to, just to be able to relate to one another, relate to another perspective, argue in a way where, I may disagree with the point, but I don't disagree with the person. And I think you can learn those types of skills through books. And I think we don't press that enough. We don't stress it enough. And so it's something that I think is missing. And then on the other side of things, in terms of like actual books, I think when we look at all of the things that are happening right now with our young people, with drill music, hip hop, all the things that are going on in community, the violence, things that are happening related to food deserts, book deserts, all of the challenges right now with inflation and everything being sky high. We got to be able to be current. Everything. It's okay that we have the great Black history books and the great stories like that, but I think we also have to remain current. What's happening right here and now, because that's where our young people's minds are most of the time. It's not so much that they're focused on the past, and we have to have a message that resonates with them today. So I think that that's an area of opportunity in terms of people who are authors or creators, to really make things that are present moment, that deal with issues that our young people are currently facing.
Yeah, I want to add one thing that was fantastic, and Evan, I appreciate that, and I want to just acknowledge the incredible work that Latanya and Jurema and Iesha that you're doing, and to actually address the issues and to hear what happened in the Bronx. Barnes and Noble closed their only store. At some point, there was one store that came in, and then to see that they're saying that this isn't enough, and we need to bring more stores out there, and to recognize that it can't just be about a store here or there or a library here or there. And we all need to contribute to it, of bringing books out into communities, and whether it's going to block clubs, which we do, or churches or places that not waiting for people to come and going out into the world. And there shouldn't be book deserts there, and we can change that if we, whether it's little free libraries or school libraries and supporting those bookstores, but also just making sure that books are always a presence.
Here's another issue. I just called out our Board of Ed for tossing books out. So I'm constantly at the end of the school year getting pictures of really great novels being
Latanya, your sound went out. Your sound went out, Latanya. No. Come back in. Come back in, girl. Come back in. No, it's still not working. Come in, come out, and then come back. And I can kind of speak to what she was saying, and then she'll come back and explain more. So I think that one of the things that we see happening is just like not only just falling in love with reading for kids, but just like how are the adults viewing literature and the importance of it. And so she's going to speak to something that happened in the Bronx, but even last year we got called in because again it was like some pictures circulating about at the end of the school year they were cleaning out libraries and it was like throwing them in the dumpsters, right? And so I think just also another problem is that we have to, a lot of times when we're going into these schools, make sure that the adults in that space are understanding like how we can work together in community with organizations, with bookstores, with authors of how we can really make these books come to life. Because I don't know about you, but I would love to hear like what do you think is the messaging with something like that, right? Like if you see on TV or you see on Facebook that there's like dumpsters full of books that people have thrown out at the end of the year. Like there's just so many people that can have access to that. So I know she's gonna come back in, but would anybody love to add to that point?
Well, Jurema, I would say that for me personally, so since even before my son was born, I was collecting books, autographed by Black authors that wrote, and I had made sure that they wrote a special message to him inside of those books, so that one day, he would have his own library, could go back to those books, and then even share them with his own children later on down the line. So I think if you look right now behind me, I mean, I have my books directly behind me, but I have a bunch of books that I have in my library. And I think that the message is, if you've read it several times and it's your library, I think of some of our great philanthropists who, when they pass away, they gift their library to certain organizations or to certain causes. And I think that's what it should be. That's what we should be doing, is passing along the knowledge and the wisdom and all of the lessons that we've learned through these magnificent books to the next generation. I think that's the right thing that should be happening. Although from what you just described, it doesn't sound like people have really adopted that.
And I kind of think it's more important to do it than ever because they have this whole wave of like the banning of the books, and and I know for my educators and things like that, like the books that are being banned are particular books, and like that means that's banning of the history. So it is our job because to educate the youth, our kids, my son, why they don't want you to read this. And so the whole access to books that they want to get rid of is all the more reason to make sure that they read those books.
Cool. I know that Latanya is going to come back in, but I think just to your point, you lead me to my next question: is are there particular books that you would like to recommend that people who either watch this live or watch it later, which are like recommended reads that we should be able to offer to our listeners? And I'll kick it off with two books that I have. So one that I think is really, really awesome. So to your point, we with my org, we do book clubs. And so I'm very intentional about the books we have our babies read. And so this was actually one of the books that our 8 to 10-year-olds read, which was Stamped for Kids. And this was a really great conversation, back to Iesha's point that it was able to bring up the history of racism, just different movements that were developed, and names of individuals, which piqued curiosity in our readers. And so many of them were shocked to even learn of like all the different movements that happened in Chicago. Understanding like my school is named after that person, not even knowing like who the person was, and just being able to see their name in a book, just as you said, like continue that dialogue. And so I think it's important topics like racism when it comes to movements are the conversations that people try to ban. However, what I have seen is that kids are not aroused to do something dangerous. If anything, they feel empowered that they can create change, right? They're able to see others who saw injustice, who saw issues, and this was their way of going about it, right? And so I think if we don't allow them to see other models of change, how do we expect our youth now, which we'll sometimes like demonize, like, oh, they're not doing nothing, whatever. But you need to empower them. You got to give them aspirations of people who did it as well. And then another book I would recommend is Unspeakable, the Tulsa Race Massacre. I like this book because, again, it really talked about a topic that many of the kids were unfamiliar with, but it also allowed them to see like the brilliance of their culture, because it does talk about like Black Wall Street and some of the other aspects of that was happening in Tulsa, which was very, very, very important. So those would be two of my recommendations. We're going to hand it out to our other panelists to give some recommendations that they would like to give.
I could do mine too. This is probably my favorite question, but I definitely recommend The Caste by Isabel Wilkerson. It talks about the caste system, but for me, it was a big eye opener. But the knowledge that I gained from it, I know for a fact a lot of people don't know. So I definitely recommend people read Caste. And then I'm still a big fan with my students, The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. Just because the language that it speaks, my kids were at 100% reading it, and the dialogue was like top tier. So those are two things that I recommend, and they trying to ban the Hate You Give from schools. So that's more of another reason to make sure that you read it with your eighth graders, because it it opens up their it opens up the door for a lot, in the dialogue is necessary for that ambition that we want from the kids, because we want them to be ambitious, and we want them to make sure they know that their voice is important in where we're trying to go.
I'll be glad to.
Also,
Go ahead, sorry.
I was also going to say, this is also a time where we want to be able to have you share what is happening in your org. So any like 30-second shameless plug about something they should look out for, especially with Rose Café. So I'm gonna go back to Iesha, but now each person, when you share your book, also give us about 30 seconds about what is something that listeners should be looking out for in regards to the work that you do. So we'll go back to Iesha and then circle back around.
Okay, so I sell books, you guys, but I sell books to promote peace. I live in a community that's lacking a lot of resources, but I just want to start with books. But the bigger picture is to decrease the violence in the neighborhood. I have a peace walk coming up August the 7th. It's also going to be a book drive that I think me and Jurema is going to partner on. But it's just to raise awareness and like bring people to the community so they can see it for themselves, so that we can start getting some resources over there for those kids in that community.
Cool. Who would like to go next?
I'd be glad to share. I'll do a very quick book recommendation, and I can tell you where you can buy it, and maybe that'll be both in one. One of the books that we love selling in our stores is by Dr. Evel Ewing, who wrote a middle grade novel, in addition to many other works for adults and for children, and for all ages, I should say, including some Marvel comics. There's a book called Maya and the Robot, and it's about a middle grade girl, fifth grade girl, who builds confidence through science, actually, and through a robot that she finds comes to life, and it's just delightful story about what it means to build confidence. And it's not just at 57th Street Books that one could buy it. It's any bookstore or that's in the community, as opposed to getting it online or getting it somewhere else, to actually really think about what those bookstores in your community are doing and finding and supporting their work as well. And it's called Maya and the Robot.
Awesome. Eve, we love. We talked about Eve. She's amazing. Evan and I will hand it over to you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I would say I got a long list of books. So, but let me give you the short list. I think if you have an older child, anything by Walter Dean Myers, any of his novels that really dive deep into the Black struggle, the Black experience, I think are fantastic books that you can add to a child's collection, especially if you have like a middle grade child or older. I think those are great books. I love Amanda Gorman's Chain Sings. She did a phenomenal job on that book. I love Matt Cherry's Hair Love. I love so with my son, I'm always finding like books that he'll really grab onto. So we found a book, and I'm trying to look up the author real quick, but the title is Swoosh, and it's about the creation of the Super Soaker and the whole story behind how the Super Soaker was established. So just a phenomenal book. And then, hey, shameless plug, but if you have young children, pre-K through kindergarten, I would love for them to check out the Kahari series at EJR Books. Those are my books that I write to empower our young people. And then one last thing I would say that I'm working on. The next book that I've created is a book that is dedicated to children who have been adopted. And it's a story that'll be coming out in August, actually right around when the Black Women's Expo is going to launch.
I love it. I love it. Latanya, let's see. I think you there.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yay! So, one thing by Walter D. Myers, Jason Reynolds, and I think right now, Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson, because of the whole R. Kelly thing. I think that book was important, so people can talk about how older men shouldn't be hanging around young women, and young girls, and how that whole story unfolds. I think as Black girls, we're looked at as being grown or too sassy or what have you, and a lot of the times when things are happening to us, we get ignored. So I think that for right now, all the books always change, but because of the R. Kelly sentence, I think that one right now is what I want to say.
All right, all right.
Am I so-
No. I know you're good. I agree. What I would also want to add to this is that, which we don't have time for, because we are at the end of our time, is that books are just ways to, like we said, have those conversations and like needed conversations. I would love to also plug Evan because he's amazing. He has a book series that also talks about like autism, which I have actually like used with my own son. And I think a lot of times when we're thinking about what's missing in literature is just also the types of conversations that come out of books. I've met a lot of independent authors in which I can also give titles of their books that I'm always supporting self-published and traditionally published authors because the stories matter. He has a book, like I said, about autism that I use with my son that actually helped him better understand a classmate of his. I had an author who wrote about like how do you talk about death with your children. These are just all real world issues that books allow us to have a caveat or a catalyst to like really have those conversations. So that would be my thing. And my shameless plug is that if you are in the Chicagoland area on July 30th, I am along with an amazing committee of individuals hosting the Words of Wonder Literary Festival. It will be an amazing time for all readers along with their families. We have things from as young as babies up to teens. We have writing workshops. We have writing workshops by a variety of people. We have an illustration workshop led by E.B. Lewis. If you know who he is, he's an amazing, amazing illustrator. We also have a youth and family area. We have live performances. We will have our headliner author this year is Jacqueline Woodson, along with a variety of things that'll be happening. It's 11 to 5 at Gately Stadium. You can visit burstinsobooks.org to learn more. But again, I'm just so happy that we were able to have this conversation tonight with each and every one of the people that are on the panel. And I just want to thank Nora and Cindy for just creating this space for us to have dialogue, because I think even all of us in this space of creating access for children and for families, we need a space where we can talk to one another. Like, I'm loving this chat because we got so many connections that's going to happen after this panel, which I'm excited about because the work just continues. So thank you for allowing us to be on this panel today. Brooks Permissions.
Thank you so much, Jurema, for such an outstanding panel. Evan, Jeff, Rose, Latanya. I know your chat says Rose. I know that's not your name, but look, you're gonna be Rose today. Thank you all so much for joining us for this outstanding panel. Iesha, thank you. Brain not here. Thank you for joining us and giving your words and your works and your time and your talents and your gifted minds to this amazing stream. What's coming up next? Well, next month for the GB7, we will be jumping back into education. We'll be talking about how to teach Gwendolyn Brooks to middle schoolers. We have three educators that are coming to have that conversation. But before we run away, Jurema, we want to give you the floor once more, and we want to make sure that there's nothing else that you want to plug before you run away. So one more time, we'll toss it back over to you.
Oh, thank you, Darius. If I'm going to plug anything, I want to plug Brooks Permissions. I believe that the work and the mission of the organization is amazing. Nora knows how much I love her. Cindy knows how much I love her. And I just feel honored whenever I'm able to have opportunities to work with them. They both are individuals who helped me to be where I am today and continue to support my work. And so if anything, I would say is go and follow Brooks Permissions, get involved, support. As you heard about the different publications coming out, buy it for your classroom library. Those who are listening, if you are a bookseller, you need to add it to yours. But again, I think it really comes back to us supporting each other and knowing that that is how we really transform communities. So that's my last plug, Darius.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Jurema, for your outstanding works and everything that you're doing for the community. All of you are doing for this community, because we desperately need every single one of you and the work that you're doing. So thank you. Well, we've come to the end of our time, ladies and gentlemen. The last thing we have to announce is stay tuned, because coming up in September, things are going to shift a little bit in the land of Brooks Permissions. We're working on a bit of a relaunch, if you will, a reintroduction to our community. We want to make sure that we're serving you to the best of our ability, and we'll be working on that. So look out for that in September. All in all, on behalf of myself, Nora, Cindy, and Pam, all of us at Brooks Permissions, we want to say thank you. And everyone, we'll see you next month for the next GB7.